everyone. Welcome to Inspire 101. Today, we're looking at the question, where to start reading the Bible. Where should I start reading the Bible? There's so many books here. There's so many books within the Bible. Where's the best way to start? I've just started my journey with Jesus. I've just given my life to him. I'm just trying to dive in. I want to begin to grow, but I know I'm supposed to read my Bible, but is there a good place to start? Is there a bad place to start? Let's answer that question. First of all, you have to understand just how powerful this book is. It is, of course, it's the best-selling book of all time, and it's the most widely read book in the entire world. In fact, they actually leave it off of the best-selling book list every year because it always is at the very top by far. So this is the Bible. Everyone's reading it. Everyone should read it. The Bible, not everyone, but a lot of people are reading it. The Bible is also, it's very practical. As much as it's God's holy word, inspired by God, written by human beings, but inspired by God, it's this. It is useful. 2 Timothy 3:16-17 tells us that it is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. The Bible is going to prepare you, equip you, and help you get to know who Jesus is, who God is, and who you are. So reading the Bible is one of the best ways, of course, to get to know God. But if we're being honest, reading the Bible can be a little bit confusing at times, a little bit difficult at times, because we don't know where to start. And so here's the thing. Yes, we know the Bible is inspired. In fact, it's a collection of 66 books written by 40 different authors over a 1,500-year period. How amazing is that? And it has a consistent theme, and it doesn't contradict itself. It's amazing. It's not organized in chronological order for the most part, like most books. Instead, it is categorized the way we have it by genres, which includes history and prophecy and poetry and letters. And so each book is broken. If you're brand new to this may be not new to you, but for some of you it may be. Each book is broken into chapters and verses, and we did that, and human beings did that after. God didn't put those chapters and verses in there. We did that so it's easier for people to follow along and find their place. So here is where you should start. Here's some pointers, you guys, where to start reading the Bible. Let me say this. Number one, don't start at the beginning. If you've never read the Bible, if you're brand new to this, I want to give you some advice. Don't start at the beginning. You think it makes sense. Hey, I'm going to hit Genesis. I might as well start with page 1. I do that with all my books. I'm telling you, with the Bible, don't start at the beginning. And here's the reason why. The Old Testament, which is the beginning, there's the Old Testament and New Testament. The Old Testament is all pointing to Jesus and the need for Jesus, right? And then in the New Testament, the Gospels is just stories about Jesus. And then the rest of the New Testament is how we're different because of Jesus. We see that so it's really, everything is pointing to Jesus. Everything's pointing to the cross. And after the cross, everything's pointing to how the cross has changed us and how we should live. So you can't properly understand the Old Testament without seeing it through the lens of the cross, without seeing it first by understanding who Jesus is and what he's actually done. That's how you need to read the Old Testament, or it's going to be very confusing to you. It can be like, you can see all these laws, all these requirements, like, oh my goodness, am I gonna be punished for all this? And I'm telling you, you have to understand it through the lens of Jesus and the cross first. So don't start at the beginning. Here's the second advice, start with Jesus. Start with Jesus. That's right. Start in the Gospels. Just get to know Jesus, because the whole Bible is pointing to Jesus. Old Testament and New Testament, it's ultimately pointing to Jesus. So start with the Gospels. I would say, you're like, DJ, I looked and there's like 4 Gospels in there. Which one do I start with? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's okay if you start with Matthew. It's the first gospel in there, but I would recommend you start with John. And let me tell you why. John not only tells you what he did, but it tells you who he is. Jesus has described not just the things he did, the miracles he did, but John actually talks about who Jesus is. And so that's a great place to start, is John, and then begin to hit Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's really cool because it's like a bunch of guys went on a trip together, and they're all writing in their journal of what happened, and everyone has a different perspective of what happened, right? So a lot of it is the same, but there are some different nuances by Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So it's worth reading all of them. And that's just a great way to get to know Jesus even more. So don't start at the beginning, start with Jesus. I recommend starting with John. And I would even say after John, go check out Acts. What is Acts? Acts is really the beginning of the church. It's after Jesus has ascended into heaven, and now it's the beginning of the church. How did those first believers, those first Christians, how did they live? What did they go through? How did the church spread? It's amazing to see just how they begin to live, because that's how we're called to live. That's examples for us. So check out Acts right after you read the Gospels. Now, number 3 is this. Don't start at the beginning, start with Jesus. And then if you're like, I got a craving, DJ, I want to go to the Old Testament, it's calling me. It's like the whole half of my Bible. I got to read something in there. Well, I would recommend, hey, if you're going to go in the Old Testament, check out Proverbs. Practical wisdom. In fact, you could do a proverb a day. There's 31 chapters in Proverbs. And so you can even do 1 chapter a day. Great practical wisdom that I think you'll enjoy as well. But just start there. And then branch off after that. But here's the thing. I would do this. If you're going to be reading the Bible, it's great to read it with others. In fact, even read it on your own. But if other people are reading the same things you're reading, then you can discuss it and talk about it. And hey, that's a great way to do it in a connect group if you're not in a connect group. And so I would encourage you to do this, something called just spend a time, maybe it's a chapter a day, and it's a time of just reading some scripture and just writing down what God's speaking to you about, and and just praying and writing down how God is speaking to you. And so I think we have an Inspire 101 on just doing your devotions, and I would check that out next. But if you're just looking at where do I start, DJ, start not at the beginning. Start with Jesus in the Gospels, maybe then move into Acts. Start with John, I recommend. And then if you're going to do the Old Testament, jump into some Proverbs. That's where to start reading the Bible. Inspire 101. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you guys next time.